Wars are perfect occasions to try to bind everybody into one common interest, to say, you know, we're all together in this. In fact, of course, that attempt, that persistent attempt by the people who run the country to pretend that the interests of ordinary people, of working people, of farmers, of slaves, of servants, are the same as their interests, that pretense has been persistent throughout American history. But it has not been a successful attempt. It's been partially successful. But you can see the lack of success, or the lack of total success, by the amount of class rebellion there has been in American society right from the beginning. We have different notions of what is security, and national security is just a very convenient way of binding everybody together in what Kurt Vonnegut called in his book Cat's Cradle, he called it a grand falloon. A grand falloon is a kind of artificial entity in which you pack people together when they really don't have a common interest, and you deceive them into thinking they do. Actually, the fear of terrorism today plays the same role that the fear of communism played in the 1950s. And the good news is that these attempts only partially work, or they work only for a time, or, you know, as Lincoln said, you can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time. You can't fool all of the people all of the time. And so we're seeing this right now with the Bush administration, where it was able to fool the American population into accepting the war on Iraq. 75% support immediately, you know, as the war began. But then as people began to catch on, that no, this is not diminishing terrorism, this is not helping us, this is not saving us, this is depleting whatever funds we need for human resources and even for veterans' benefits. And as people begin to catch on to this, and as our people are dying, and of course there's less consciousness of Iraqis dying, but still there's consciousness that there's a bloody mess and that we've been lied to, and the result is very clear. More than half of the population now does not support the war. I think, in fact, that the only way the Democrats can win is if they discard the notion that they can be a sort of Republican light, you know, discard the notion that they can take a position that's slightly different than Republicans and win. No, I think we've already seen it twice. We've seen Gore, we've seen Kerry, and as a matter of fact, Clinton. Although Clinton, you know, won the presidency twice, he did not win it easily. You know, if not for Ross Perot breaking the Republican voting bloc, Clinton would have been defeated, and so these attempts to present a moderate Democratic Party, they don't even work from a practical point of view, from a winning point of view, aside from the fact that, I mean, to my mind, they're immoral in that they embrace sort of the worst policies of the Republican Party. But I believe that the Democratic Party could win a very large number of Americans and a majority of the voters of America if it bluntly came out and spoke to what I believe most Americans really want. And I believe most Americans really want peace. Most Americans do not want to send our young people over to war. They can be cajoled and enticed and propagandized into believing the opposite. But I believe that the most natural instincts are against war. And certainly by now, the experience that we've had in Afghanistan and certainly in Iraq, the experience is clear that war does not help us. War does not make us safer. And therefore, a Democratic administration, I believe, a Democratic candidate, a Democratic Party that came out and said, we promise that if elected, we are not going to send our young people overseas. We're prepared to defend our country. We are not prepared to attack other countries. If there are tyrants, the people are going to have to deal with those tyrants. We will help other people. We're not going to be isolationists. We'll send food and medicine wherever it is needed. But we will take the hundreds of billions of dollars that we're spending on this war, and which are killing our young people, and we're going to spend that money for free health care for everybody, for guaranteed jobs for everybody, for a higher minimum wage, to make sure that the American people live in a way that is commensurate with the enormous wealth that this country has. I believe people would respond to that. I don't think it's inevitable that people should react negatively to the word progressive or even to the word liberal. But of course, if all the major politicians, Democrat and Republican, unite in shunning those words, then people will get the idea that those words are to be rejected. I believe that most Americans are class conscious. That is, they wouldn't use the word. And if they were asked in a poll, are you class conscious? They might say no, But the fact is that most Americans are class conscious. When they have taken polls over the years, and it's been true over decades, and they ask people, do you believe that a group of small interests run the country? People say, 85% of them say yes. People know that there are rich people who control the politics, who control the culture. They know this. They're not fighting against it because they think it's futile to fight against it, but they know it's true. So if somebody says, well, you're appealing to class hatred or class anger. No, there's a simple historical answer to this. There are classes in this country. There are rich and there are poor. Even Edwards said it in the campaign. There's them and there's us. They're the people with the money and the power, and there's most of the American people. So as soon as you get beyond slogans, as soon as you get beyond 2 or 3 words like class interest or class hatred, and you explain that yes, there are different interests in this country, and those people represent their own interests. They represent the interests of the super rich. And they represent the interests of people who don't care if we go to war because their kids aren't going. And yes, people are voting against their interests, but they're voting against their interests because they've been bamboozled about what their interests are and who is going to serve their interests. And what the Democratic Party has failed to do, and certainly what John Kerry and Al Gore failed to do in the last elections, is to educate the American public, to explain things to them, not to give them a bunch of rhetoric and slogans and so on, and we will build bridges to the new century and all of that. No, what they need is a sort of clear explanation of where their interests lie. It is important for us to recognize what we have done wrong in the past. So that we don't have to do that again. It's important to recognize slavery and racial segregation. It's important to recognize that we have maltreated other people and invaded other countries. It's important to recognize that. But it's also important, yes, to give people a positive picture of another America. There is the America of all those heroic people in this country who have struggled for justice. Or the black and white people who worked against slavery, the working people in this country who worked for the 8-hour day, the people who have protested against war. We have to, while recognizing what has been wrong has not been what the American people have done, but what governments have done. What has been right is what the American people have achieved in spite of government policy.